Thank you all. Thank you to WGBH and thank you to all of the people in the audience and beyond this room. Michael said earlier today that we are here to change the world, and I think that really resonated with many of us. I was speaking a few weeks ago to an expert in diffusion of educational innovations, and we were talking about this simulation that I'll be showing you in a minute. And he said, well, that's a radical innovation. How are you going to get that out to the world? And I thought, well, we're taking really rigorous science. We're making it engaging and interactive, giving people an opportunity to experience the world from a perspective they haven't seen before. And besides, the people who are going to use this want to change the world. So I think we're okay. So what I want to, thanks. So what I want to talk to you today about is what we call simulation-based role-playing games. And I'm going to show you one example, but I think that there are many potential examples, this just being one. So what do I mean by simulation-based role-playing game? Basically what we're talking about is taking an opportunity to really compress time and reality into a situation where users can, or participants can, learn about a system from an experience in which failure is low risk and not expensive. So what we're doing is taking an interactive computer simulation, combining that with role play, and the interactive computer simulation represents a very complex physical technical system. In our case, climate change and the human energy system associated with it. We're also taking role play, and as I've learned from running this simulation exercise with climate scientists, who, by the way, typically fry the planet, I don't know, go figure, they're doing that because they don't really know about the social dynamics involved in human decision making, which are often much more complex than the science is itself. So we're giving people an opportunity to experience that system through role play. The combination of their collective decision making with the physical technical system represented by the interactive computer simulation then leads to simulated outcomes. And this is actually really a lot like what us scientists do, right? We have a mental model of how a system works. We pose a hypothesis based on that mental model. We then run an experiment and find out what the data tell us. And so that's kind of these arrows going back. How do our interventions in a system, or our understanding of a system, influence our view of that system, and also, we hope, of the decisions that we make for further interventions? So I think Jason also really set this up really nicely, which is, I think, still somewhat of an open question, something that we want to research more fully, is do these simulated experiences lead to real action? And we have some preliminary evidence that suggests they do. But that ultimately, we're all, playing games is a lot of fun. Education is great. But ultimately, for these future leaders who are all trying to educate, we need to be reducing our emissions and addressing climate change in a very real way. So that's our question, is do these lead to personal action, problem solving, and ultimately policy? Okay, so I mentioned that I'm going to talk about one particular simulation-based role-playing exercise today called World Climate. And a lot of us have been talking about going to Paris. And so I want to, bienvenue à Paris, welcome. We want to basically bring thousands of people, really millions of people, to Paris to experience the UN climate negotiations for themselves. So this game is a simulation of the United Nations climate negotiations. And in this game, just like in the real world, unfortunately, not everything is equitable. So we have the wealthy countries of the world sitting usually towards the front of the room in very comfortable chairs with some pretty good food. The rapidly developing countries of the world are doing better these days. So, but things are kind of still crowded, and the food's not quite as sweet. I actually had my vice chancellor engaging in this game, as well as a few of our deans and our provost. And my vice chancellor was in the back of the room on the floor with the less developed countries of the world. They don't get any food unless the wealthy countries decide to share their food with them. Welcome to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And then you all are challenged to come up with a global deal that successfully addresses climate change. You all would receive a confidential briefing statement that lays out your geopolitical interests, provides you with some background information about your economy, about climate change impacts, about the political will in your countries, policies and clean technologies in your countries, and kind of a global perspective on emissions and climate change more generally. And then from those positions, you have an opportunity to advocate for your block's position. And I want to also mention that we typically put people into positions that that they're not representing in the real world. So my student from India would play the US. My student from China would play Brazil. And they take those roles on remarkably well. From their understanding of the system, they make decisions and also negotiate with each other to try to convince other blocks to come up with decisions that they think will be beneficial to the outcome. Then there's the reality check. So this is where that physical technical system comes into play, where we're actually taking their decisions and entering them into a simulation to enable them to find out what the impacts are of those decisions according to the best available science we have today, really the consensus science. So I'm going to just walk you through very briefly what this looks like. And it is not virtual reality. We would love to make it more of a immersive experience from that way. So this is just a bunch of graphs. But it is amazing that when you're the one making the decisions, you pay very close attention to graphs. I've never seen people so enthralled with graphs before in my life, and I see a few people nodding their heads who have seen this in action. So what you see over here is very simple. It's on the panel to the left is emissions of carbon dioxide in billions of tons per year out through 2100. And on the right are the expected temperature outcomes from those emissions decisions. And this is a simple version. It's a 3-block version. So you're going to see that the developed nations of the world have just come to a radical decision to flatline their emissions in 2017. This is very ambitious. And you can see that that red line representing their emissions is now flat, and it has an impact. And we're moving forward, and others are making decisions as well. Flatlining and developing B in 2045. Now the developed world is going to start reducing their emissions in 2020 by 2.5% a year. That's very, very aggressive. And now we've got China and Brazil and India are stepping up in 2040. They're also going to follow our lead. Need a little bit of water. And then the less developed countries in 2050. And you can see that temperature line coming down as they're entering their decisions. And I just want to mention that I'm just showing you sort of a little bit about this. We could also look at sea level rise, at ocean acidification, at other climate impacts and assumptions about the climate system with the simulation. So just to, before I get into learning impacts, I just want to mention that this is the real deal. So this is not just, this simulation was actually designed for policymakers, not for students. It's been used to brief President Obama before the UN Copenhagen negotiations, the climate negotiations in Copenhagen, sorry. It's been used by the State Department extensively, EU environment ministries. It's been translated into Mandarin. So students know that they are using something which is used by the real decision makers in the real game, in the real world. So what do they learn? Well, from open-ended responses, students have told us that, or participants have told us, that they've gained an appreciation of the complexity of the climate system. They have an improved understanding of the scale of climate change. They have an improved understanding of the social dynamics and an increased motivation to address the problem. We know from our data that 70 to 100% of respondents said that it's engaging. It's education for action. In other words, they're more motivated to do something. And that it delivers key insights about climate change. Importantly, that people remember. Up to 4 years later, we've gone back and asked people.
So one of the people we asked was one of my students who we brought Dr. Rooney-Varga and I decided to do a collaboration and started a project at Cambridge Rindge Latin School in the summertime, and just to see what we could come up with from a curriculum standpoint, how to use world climate, and also how to use my skills in media and teaching media and getting students not only to learn about the science, but then to communicate it further with others. So Rindge is, Cambridge public schools are about 48% free and reduced lunch, 60 home languages spoken and represented within the school. We have a growing student body. At the time, we were about 1,700. We're now about 2,000. But at the time in 2011, less than 3% of the school was taking AP Environmental. That has actually doubled now. There's well, there's more students, and so I'm not sure exactly what the percentage points are, but at the time that we did this program, no one who walked in the door to the program was actually taking AP Environmental. A few of them decided to take it afterwards, after a 6-week program with us. And they were pretty typical students. What made them extremely bonded is their lack of interest in what we had to discuss with them. They patiently came in, some of them late every day, and you know, they all liked Dr. Rooney-Varga. They thought she was really nice. They applauded her enthusiasm for the science, but they kept on saying, Ms. Brisk, why? Why are we doing this? Like, we all know climate. And I think it speaks a little bit to some of what we've talked about, and we'll talk more during today, is if there's no kind of connection to potential solutions, our students have very little to hold on to. If it's just bad news, what are they going to do about it? But we had this transformative day about a week and a half into the program, and that was World Climate. And I have some suspicions as to why, and we've researched a little bit about whether those suspicions are true, but part of it is creating that personal narrative, that personal connection, and understanding that the scale of the problem may be huge, but there's also a part of this problem that is human-sized. That is, in the negotiation, you can play a role, and you can see that humans could make a difference. And this is what that looks like.
No, but we buy it. We buy it. We don't get it for free. You don't buy it. 75%. Wait, stop. 70% of everything is made in China. 75% of everything is made in China. Ah! Wait. Shower. China. I don't care about China. China, I don't care. You're getting 25. You're getting 20.
So. Now, these were the same students, actually. That particular student was one student who came in late almost every day and never came in late again after World Climate because they got very, very engaged in what this was about and actually felt like, had a personal experience through the simulation of what these numbers meant and what political action might look like or social action might look like. The other person in light blue was one of the ones who kept on whining to me. The next day, Cam got online and he was watching hours of C-SPAN. Hours of C-SPAN. Watching what his congressional leaders were saying about climate. The resulting work of all these students, in our case, what we were trying to do, we tried to frame learning. We wanted to give them some ideas of what the questions were, what the big questions were. We presented information, as teachers do. And then we wanted to create mental engagement, get inside their heads, get the empathy piece going. And then that turned into them speaking to the world about what they'd learned. The relevance of climate change, then the concepts and data they needed to know to understand, and the where did this information come from, led to the climate exercise, World Climate Exercise, which in their reflection, they felt suddenly very engaged in what needed to get done. And their resulting projects were media projects that they needed to create and share in a big screening and then continue to share. And this is a montage of their work.
I'm live here right in front of the Cambridge Public Library with people's answers to some questions on climate change.
The electricity we use, the planes we travel in, the boats we ride, all emit carbon dioxide, a heat-trapping gas that comes from burning fossil fuels. Climate change.
It's about carbon dioxide. Well, what is carbon dioxide? Let's just go to a fundamental question.
What percentage of climate scientists believe that climate change is man-made? Bill.
I think it's 50-50.
Gonna affect us when you leave the AC running. Yeah, I'm here to tell you something. America runs on Dunkin', no, it runs on fossil fuels. Gonna be hard to stay cool with all this hydrocarbon we use. Fool, this is what we need to do.
You need to note that this is 2053. This is a science fiction film that was created. These are just little smatterings of what they were doing. So these could, in other classrooms, maybe you wouldn't be creating media to perform knowledge and understanding, but maybe personal action, local action, exams, reflections. There's many ways that you could end, and world climate is a piece of the process of learning.
All right, great, thanks. So just, just to wrap up really quickly, we do want to get this out to the world. And so we launched a project actually at the White House, the World Climate Project, in August. And since that time, we are seeing this ballooning global interest in using this tool. Really, what we want to do is invite you to join this growing global community. We have resources that are available to do, everything that you need, freely available, and please let us know how we can help. Oh, and I also just want to say that that I want to really thank the team of people at both the Climate Interactive team and the Climate Change Initiative at UMass Lowell. This is not about me. This is about a lot of people. Thank you.